Manufacturing. Today's podcast is about manufacturing. Welcome to the Steelo podcast, and I'll be talking about something that is very, very close to my heart, as I mentioned in the introduction, manufacturing. Now, when we think about it, I would say that every single business, and not even business but in our personal life, whatever we do is actually manufacturing, because whatever we achieve, it means we started with something less of, and when we finished, there was something more of. So even when we're cleaning our house, washing up, preparing dinner, clearing up the garden, clearing out our bedroom, whatever it is, we actually start at one point and we know what the end goal is, and the question is, how do we get there? Moving on to business. Any business is actually a manufacturing business. A software development company is also a manufacturing company. They start with a blank text file. They then have some information coming from their customers, and then they develop something, and at the end of it, the product is a working piece of software. A solicitor, same thing. They start with an empty desk. Something lands on their desk. They then have to work on it. They have to make a few phone calls, do some searches, probably go back to their academic books if needed, and then at the end of it, they come up with a end product. And then, needless to say, any company that actually makes physical products is obviously a manufacturing company. But because manufacturing companies make the physical product, it's so much easier to relate to them as manufacturing companies. So when it comes to manufacturing, when you break things down and just look at the core of what manufacturing is, in my opinion, the best analogy would be a race to the top of a summit. So let's imagine we start at the bottom in a valley, surrounded by trees, and the only goal, and there's only one winner, is to reach the summit of the mountain behind the woods. So obviously the rules are quite straightforward. It is the person that reaches the summit first. Not the one that took the most scenic route, or the one that took the longest, or someone who went on a detour and ended up in a local pub. It is the person that hits the summit first that wins. And this is exactly what actually manufacturing is. It's about knowing what the end goal is and then trying to get there as quickly as you can. Now, the reason why speed is so important is because time is money. And I know this is a well-known saying, and I'm not just saying it because it is well-known, but because it is very, very true. Any business works on a profit and loss statement. Therefore, with a fixed amount of overheads in a month, if you can make more, you are better off. Your net margins should be higher. When it comes to personal life, the same is true. We only live once. We only have probably around 80 years in our tank. Some of us already 1/3, if not halfway through. So time is limited. So it might sound funny, but even when you're clearing up your house, you only, if you are able to do it in 2 hours instead of 4 hours, you've saved yourself 2 hours of your life, which you can spend on doing whatever else you would like to do. It could be running, like in my case. It could be watching TV. It could be going to a game, a concert, whatever it is. You are basically managing time more wisely, and you are able to do more in the same amount of time. So we've established that whatever we do is basically boils down to manufacturing, and the goal of manufacturing is to make things as quickly as possible. So these are the sort of guidelines, but the question is, how do we actually make it all happen? And obviously there have been various people and even universities involved in making sure that manufacturing is as efficient as possible. So there are plenty of schools of manufacturing, but I would say there's one that definitely stands out, and it is the well-known lean manufacturing. So if we go back in history, initially the whole thing was started off with the Industrial Revolution, where machines started to replace humans, and suddenly people realized that actually a machine can do so much more than a human. The next thing was, unfortunately, the prices of the product started to dip because everyone else was able to now make more. Therefore, the race to make things as cheap as possible began. Next, going towards lean manufacturing. On the way to lean, there is a company called Ford. Ford, the car manufacturer, and Henry Ford, in my opinion, when you read his books and his journey, I think he is the father of lean manufacturing. And actually the guys from Toyota admit that they've learned a plenty lot from Ford. And luckily with Ford, he was very generous when it came to sharing his knowledge and experience. So Taji Ohno from Toyota was able to learn directly from Ford. Now, unfortunately today, we think of Ford as the father of mass production, which is not necessarily true, because yes, they did make a lot of the Fords, but actually his production was as lean as it gets. They did not have any waste. Whatever ended up being as surplus to requirements, they found a way to recycle it, be it melted back into rubbers for tires, or use it as cushioning for the seats. And it's really amazing at how passionate Henry Ford was actually being eco-friendly before it was actually a thing. On the other hand, though, I really admire the way Henry Ford could operate. They wanted to source some more wood from some woods that were like 100 miles away from the factory. Bang, they built a railway from the wood to the factory. They wanted to ship things from the world. Bang, they bought all freight of ships and developed their own docks just so they can serve their own company. So, yeah, it's probably impossible nowadays to just sort of build a railway across the country because of all the local objections and so on. But then moving forward, the difference between Ford and Toyota was that America, as we know, is a vast country and there's plenty of land. So when Ford wanted to build a new model, they had the luxury of being able to set up a new factory, a new building dedicated to a specific model. Now, after the World War, Toyota was in a totally different position. They were obviously destroyed by the war, and they only had a relatively small factory. And obviously, inevitably, they wanted to build more than one models. Therefore, they had the constraint of only being able to manufacture whatever they wanted from that single factory. So they were almost like forced into becoming lean. It's not that they came up with this idea on their own. They just realized that actually they just have to fit in their premises. So they had to be very creative when it came to designing the workstations. They had to make sure that the same workstation can serve a few different models. If not, the tools can be easily interchanged, just so there's minimum downtime when they actually want to shift from one model to the other. And this became the first step of creating the lean manufacturing process. And like I said, it was more by luck or just the circumstances they were in, rather than a master plan thought out beforehand. So it's actually one of the principles of being efficient, which is basically to have as less space as possible, obviously in a sensible way. I mean, if you're standing in a lift and you have to make something, then you can't even move your hands around, so that won't be productive. But on the other hand, if you have a massive unit and you basically move into it, what will naturally happen is you'll spread across the whole unit, and then when anyone needs to move pieces or work in progress from one place to the other, then they have to walk or drive a long distance, and this is 100% of wasted time. Now, for many of you, it might be easier to relate it to an office environment or maybe a building environment. And it's exactly the same. I remember when I first moved into a premises with a large office, I did exactly it. I just stuck a piece of furniture in each corner, desk in one of them as well. And after literally a few days, I realized that, bloody hell, I'm just walking the whole office to and fro just to sort out simple things. And counterintuitively, I just thought, well, no, I have to actually move everything closer to my desk. And it looked very odd. And actually, I've got a photo somewhere where I moved everything just around my desk and the whole office just looked so empty. But that's when I sort of learned myself that actually the closer you're surrounded by the things you need, the more efficient you become. So going back to lean manufacturing, it was developed over many, many years. Like I said, it wasn't something that someone came up with sitting behind the desk. And then from lean manufacturing, there are plenty of methodologies that stem out. So in no particular order, I'll cover a few of them. One of them is obviously the 5S. Now, the 5S is an abbreviation of 5 words that start with an S, and I do apologize, but don't remember what the 5 S's are, and actually no one, as far as I am aware, remembers all 5. The one that I do remember, though, is the last one, and it stands for sustain. And the reason why I probably remember it is because the last one is the most difficult one. Basically, 5S is about clearing up, or that is how many perceive it. It's basically a process of finding all the objects and tools and other pieces of equipment that you haven't been using for some time, putting it into something called a red tag area, which is basically a quarantine where you then go through it with your team and you decide what's the fate of those items. And the push is to actually get rid of them and literally throw them away. So you go through that process. Part of 5S, as you might know, is clearing, coming up with shadow boards, which means that you've got the shadow of the tool that should be there. So let's imagine pliers hanging on the wall. You take the pliers away, and behind it suddenly appears a shade of those pliers. Therefore, once you've finished using them, you should know where to put them back. And the reason why I use the word should is because that exactly touches the last word, sustain, where it's still down to humans to ensure that 5S works. And actually, the best way to sustain 5S is to do regular workshops, let's say once a month, which to me just proves that we as humans we don't necessarily operate in a lean fashion. The fact that it is most difficult to sustain 5S just proves the point that we as humans, we actually like to be a bit chaotic, which is very, very interesting. And to me, I always have this example of the glove box in our cars. It's normally the place where we keep all the rubbish, even though the car might be very, very clean inside and outside, but the glove box has all the gems that we have accumulated over the last months, if not years. And when we look at our homes, we always have this storage place that basically is in chaos. The whole house might be very, very tidy and in order, whereas there's this one place where we just give ourselves this sort of freedom to drop things and never mind whether they tidy or not. And the same is in a business. There's always a room or a corner where people dump things. And I actually don't think it is actually bad because, like I said, I think humans, they need to have this like reserve where they know they can just have this mess. And for some reasons that mess allows us to be tidy in other areas. So going back to lean manufacturing, another methodology or a sort of topic covered by Toyota, it's called Gemba or Gemba, and Gemba means basically go and see for yourself. So I'll start with an example. Let's say we've got a machine where there's oil leaking from it. Now the quickest way to just fix it is to tell the operator, well, clear up the oil. but you're not actually sorting out the problem. So Gemba means, as a manager, go and see what has happened and ask yourself the question, and they sort of invite you to ask the question 5 times as to why this happened. So you ask the question, well, why is the oil leaking? The first answer is, well, because the seal is broken. Question is, why has the seal broken? Well, it's because it's low quality. Why is it low quality? Well, because the manufacturing department has a limited budget. Why is there a limited budget? It's because the financial director has set the limited budget earlier this year. So suddenly we can see that when you go away from your desk and you actually are hands-on the issue, you then delve deeper into why things happen, you extremely increase your chances of actually getting to the bottom cause of the surface problem. This also relates to many other things, like if you are designing a new layout, and it could be even an office layout, go and try it for yourself. Sit down behind a desk or all the desks and see what it will be like for others to work in that office. There could be a process where people are struggling. Like for us, one day it was the welding bay, where welders were complaining it's a bit dark. And sitting behind the desk, you just think, well, come on guys, just get on with it. There are other places that are much darker. But it was only when we actually physically went in that bay and tried reading drawings, we immediately understood the issue, and we addressed it straight away. So don't be afraid to actually delve in, get your hands dirty, and be hands-on to find out what the real cause is. Another phrase coined by Toyota is muda. Muda basically means waste. And it's not necessarily the waste we think of, like, the offcuts or not optimizing the amount of paper we use or the pens. Muda is actually the invisible wasted time or invisible waste. And this goes back to the fact that the most important thing in manufacturing is finding the shortcut or the shortest route to the end product. And when you have work in progress, so materials that are half finished, sitting and waiting for their turn, that is wasted time. Another example of wasted time will be having workstations that are next to you, that are one after the other when it comes to the workflow, but physically they are, let's say, in different buildings or in the opposite corners of the same building. So that means that the items from one workstation need to be transported to the other one, and that takes a lot of time. And that is exactly the muda, the waste that Toyota is trying to focus on and to get rid of. And the problem is that it's not easy to get rid of those kind of wastes because employees, if someone's driving a forklift from one place to the other and you tell them that they're wasting their time, they won't understand what you're talking about. They're thinking, well, I can't drive faster because it will be unsafe. So how am I supposed to transport things quicker? So unfortunately, it has to be a totally different mindset. It's not about just how can you speed up the process, but it's how can you magically trim out the tasks that happen in between that don't add value. So you're not getting closer to the finished product. So going back to our summit race, if someone decides to go sideways along the hill, well, that's 100% wasted time. They're not getting closer to the end goal, which is obviously the summit. Another word coined by lean manufacturing is called Anden. Anden is basically a principle where on the production line, if something isn't right, there's this red cord above each workstation and everyone has the right to pull it. And that is an alert, and basically you stop the whole production line, you alert everyone else that, hang on guys, there's a problem. So there could be a piece that doesn't conform to the quality requirements or something else. And the idea here is, and again, it's very counterintuitive because you might think, well, if there's one workstation out of 10 that is experiencing issues, well, why stop the remaining 9? Let them continue to work. But here, you're stopping everyone. Therefore, you are refocusing everyone's attention onto the issue. So now you have 10 workstations trying to solve the problem as quickly as they can, rather than just leaving it with you for you to solve yourself. So I do agree that this is a very, very powerful tool to overcome issues. Another well-known term is takt time. So basically the idea is that there is a specific time, and let's say it is 1 minute, and within 1 minute everything needs to move from one station to the next. So the whole production line is designed and broken down to tasks that last around 50 seconds, so that you have the remaining 10 seconds to shift that item from your station to the next, and you receive your working item from the previous station. So effectively what this means, and this is actually a true figure, Toyota had a takt time of 1 minute, which meant that every single minute there was a car leaving the production line. So it must have been amazing. I've never been to Toyota, but it must have been amazing to see it, this 1 minute takt time where everything moves and one car is spat out each minute. Then there are other terms like heijunka. Heijunka means that it's better to be a tortoise that makes progress rather than being a rabbit that jumps all over the place and never achieves their goal, which is kind of true, and maybe it works for mass production. For us as bespoke manufacturers, I don't sign up to this rule. I much more prefer the relay runner rule, which means that once you're handed a task, you should run with it as fast as you can until you have finished the task. So yeah, I would say there are other methodologies that work better in this case. So these are the main aspects of lean manufacturing. And there are other, let's say, fringe aspects. So together with, let's say, 5S, although it is not entirely connected, but there's something like an optimized layout. And the layout, it's not just about designing it and sort of putting the workstations in the desired locations, but it is also about marking these areas. So if you see a company with sort of different sectors on the floor with some passageways and some yellow tape and different colors in all these sections, that means that this is a company that has adopted to some extent lean manufacturing. And it is amazing how painting various sectors in different colors, how it actually works. If you just have a, let's say, factory floor, which is just bare concrete, and you just allow the whole team to step in and start working, you'll very quickly end up in chaos. There'll be piles of work in progress everywhere, and pallets and rubbish lying around. But the moment you start drawing lines on the concrete and then painting it, so let's say the walkway's in yellow and then taping it out, and also having red areas for, let's say, the red tag area, orange for, let's say, goods in, grey for storage, green for manufacturing areas, then suddenly it becomes manageable. And there's something that we subconsciously stick to, where you just don't want to put an object halfway in the middle, so like one half in the red area and one half on the yellow passageway. So you naturally tend to put things into place. Now, the thing that I've noticed, and this is slightly outside of lean manufacturing, but I'm pretty sure it is worth mentioning, is something that we call cancer. Now, obviously, cancer is a horrible disease, but related to business, there's this magical thing that happens. When someone puts an item that isn't used on a daily basis, so let's say an empty cardboard box in a corner, then this is the first invitation for someone else to put another box into that corner. So before you know it, there's one extra box. Now 2 boxes are even more inviting to someone else to put whatever they feel is not needed, but on the other hand they don't want to throw it away, or they can't be bothered to go out and throw it into the bin. So then things start accumulating, and it's in my opinion, it's just incredible to see how quickly that grows. From a very subtle looking box in the corner, suddenly you have this mess of 10, 20 items slowly and gradually building up. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily slowly, but in a very disguised way growing, and before you know it, you've got a pile of rubbish. And if you don't address it very quickly, then it will become part of the furniture. So people will just get used to the fact that this corner is for dumping unwanted stuff. So it's something that sort of goes in line with 5S and the marked sectors. It is to make sure that those sectors are clear of the things that should not be there. Sometimes, even if you have the best layout in the world, sometimes you have to prompt people to say, well, remember not to leave things on the yellow passageways and so on, because sometimes it's more comfortable for people to dump it, and sometimes it might be the only area available, so they might leave something initially temporarily, but it ends up staying there for a few days until it is addressed. So this is, I've talked about lean manufacturing, but the topic of today's podcast is manufacturing as a whole. So as good as lean manufacturing is, I think there are other outstanding tools, and one of them is the theory of constraint. Now, I won't go into details because there was one podcast which I invite you to listen to, talking about the theory of constraints. But the theory of constraints, or TOC in short, is, I would say, the best methodology for bespoke manufacturing. So what I mean by this is that, like, we do a lot of steel. We fabricate dozens of beams a day, but it doesn't mean it is mass production. Mass production is when the majority of the items are exactly the same. So let's say you have mugs, and you do thousands of the mugs, or tens of thousands of the mugs, but then each 1,000 is printed slightly differently. That would qualify as mass production, and then lean manufacturing with takt time and so on works 100%. But in our world, and there are plenty of similar businesses where we do a lot of items, but every item is literally different. Then lean manufacturing doesn't work because takt time just won't work at all. And I've tried it, but it was a disaster because you can't even predict how long a beam will take. So one beam could just have holes drilled in it, or actually we can go even a step further and just have no fabrication, just a painted beam, versus a cranked beam, which means there are plenty of mitered cuts, and it's a complicated shape, and it sometimes takes a whole day for one fabricator to make a single beam. So there's no way in the world you'll be able to successfully adopt lean manufacturing 100%. And that's why you have to mix and match the various methodologies. And actually, Eliyahu Goldratt, the father of TOC, he also admits that it's not that one is better than the other. You just have to pick the one that works best for you, and not just focus on one, but actually just mix and match. Use whatever works for you from each of these methodologies. And I remember once having a meeting with the board of a massive company. They employ like 1,000 people, and they manufacture the equipment for shops. Everything you see in a shop is basically made by them. And they were very frustrated with the fact that whenever they talk to a specialist from a specific methodology, they will always say that this is the best, the only tool that you should use. And they never agreed with it, and it was quite interesting because I also never agreed with it, so we had a lot in common to talk about. And we just said that, we just have to sort of pick the best from all worlds to that best suit our businesses. Now, when we delve deeper into manufacturing, there are other methodologies. One of them is called Six Sigma, which has been most knowingly adopted by GE. Six Sigma is about the probability of things going wrong. and they have introduced an interesting system where you have different color belts, like in karate, where you sort of become a master. But again, it might be good for aviation, for space manufacturing companies, but it definitely wouldn't work for us, for a bespoke manufacturer. So I hope this was helpful. Like I said at the very beginning, manufacturing is everywhere. Even by listening to this podcast, I'm hoping we started somewhere with less knowledge, and now you are able to take something out of it, so you made some progress. And remember, time is money, but time wisely spent is well worth it. So I do invite you to listen to our next podcast. Thank you.